Thank you very much. Right, good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to this meeting of the Complaints and Conduct Committee. So should I drop off the call, which I hope, of course, will not happen, the governance support team will let you know, and the meeting will be paused until I can come back online. I think that's the plan. So in terms of apologies today, we've got apologies from ACC Lynn Radcliffe. And can I please invite anybody to declare any conflicts of interest or any connections that may be relevant to today's business? And I can see no hands raised. I've not been notified of any other business. And can I please invite members to agree that in accordance with Section 20 of our standing orders, we will take agenda items 9 to 12 in private? Yeah. Okay, good. So then we're moving on to the minutes and actions from the previous meeting. And the first item there is for us to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of September. So that's the public session. And can I get members to agree those minutes as a correct record? Again, I see no dissent. And then we also have the public minute from the private meeting of the committee's meeting on the 4th of September. And again, can I please invite members to approve the draft public minute from that meeting as an accurate record? And again, I see no dissent. That's great. Right, so then we're moving on to the actions log. And we have got 9 actions that are proposed ongoing. And then we have got 7 actions which have been proposed for closure. And I also note that there is 1 briefing which is attached, which relates to one of the actions that is supposed to be closed. So are members content with that? I do note that there's a few that are going back as far as a year ago, and one of those, so there was a couple of actions there. I do apologize, I have literally just lost those actions from my screen, but I do have my notes, so I will just work with my notes. There are 2 actions from the 14th of November 2024. One of them is proposed for closure, and I think there will be a verbal update that will be provided. That's in relation to the work on discrimination. I think, Helen, I've got you down there as providing a verbal update on this. Is that right?
Thank you very much, Chair. And are you happy for me to go ahead with that now on this point?
I think let's just do it, yeah, because I'm quite keen to kind of clean up our action log a little bit, please.
So I would like to give the committee the reassurance that we've linked in with colleagues from Policing Together who have carried out a review of the elements of discriminatory behaviour caps that we spoke about at the end of the kind of last financial year with regards to that, having seen that increase. So the report has been completed, and we are now considering the key points that have developed out of it. To give the committee a little flavour of some of the points, one of the suggestions is obviously just to make sure in terms of the engagement by PSD with the Act Don't React training and the anti-racism training as well within the organisation, just to make sure that obviously PSD officers and staff go through that training. And then also a recommendation just about how we kind of view the matters in terms of prioritisation for kind of that kind of quicker review with regards to that. So we're just working through the key points of that report and continuing to work with our colleagues in Policing Together in relation to the points that they've raised.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Helen. So are members content with the closure of this one? I think we have seen assurance of that. And then there is another action that is, I think, related to that. So that's for PSD staff to link in with SBA staff to take forward a dip sampling piece in the work in relation to discrimination to ensure an extra level of assurance in this area. And again, this one is proposed ongoing. Darren, can I bring you in? Where are we with that?
Yes, of course, Chair. What we'd agreed at the time was, having spoken to Helen and colleagues in Police Scotland, was that the initial review that Helen referred to there would be done. And then following on from that, we would consider whether anything additional was needed supplementary to that one-off exercise, but also thereafter how we would then look to incorporate any ongoing assurance as part of our dip sampling work, which has I'll come on to shortly, has just recommenced. So I think keen to understand in more detail the work that Helen referred to there, and then we can come back to the next committee with plans around about whether anything is needed additional to that one-off piece of work, and then also how we would look to incorporate in terms of future dip sampling thereafter.
Okay. No, that's good. Thank you so much for that, Darren. I think that's really helpful. May I maybe then suggest that actually, just from a hygiene perspective, we close off this very specific action, but what we do is we give the SPAs, we give Darren, we give yourself an action for the next committee to come up with a bit of a refresher for us around what's happening with dip sampling, because I think there's a broader piece there as well. And again, you've just acknowledged we haven't done it for a while. I think it would be quite good for the committee to have a perspective on this is what we'll be doing with dip sampling going forward. What do you think, Darren?
Yeah, of course. Sorry for the avoidance of confusion. We have recommenced dip sampling, so we are bringing that back for the first time now. So we will be continuing that on a quarterly basis from now. But yeah, absolutely, to look around about how we can provide that extra layer of assurance, specifically around about discriminatory behaviours. Yeah, absolutely commit to come back to the next committee around about that.
Okay, good. Right. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, let me just have another quick look. So, and then there is one which is also still outstanding from the 27th of February this year. And this is around the work plan and the reconsideration of reports. And again, Darren, quite keen to kind of get a perspective on this because it should not be beyond our ability to get our heads together and get this action closed out. So where are we with that?
Yeah, so I'd shared into Police Scotland the draft work plan in terms of, obviously, there are a number of thematic reports that the committee have requested over the last year or so be introduced. And the need was to identify an appropriate point in the schedule that those could be tabled in, and then thereafter. I am awaiting Police Scotland to confirm when would be most appropriate in terms of doing that. I know I spoke to Helen most recently around about the organisational learning annual update, and would be keen to schedule that into the next committee in February if possible. We obviously had more recently the annual vetting thematic report, so there has been some progress on this, but there are a couple of others that we just need to pin down that at the moment are sitting as date to be confirmed, but recognising the need for these to be spread throughout the year, and ideally in the first instance, particularly on the organisational learning, is when there's a substantive update that can be provided, and then annually thereafter. In terms of the existing reports and the kind of frequency and content of those, I've had some early engagement with Police Scotland, Helen and the team around about the content of the public reporting around about both complaints and conduct. Obviously, picking up on the benchmarking work that we did a year ago around about what exists elsewhere. I've had some positive response back, and the intention there would be to look to implement a revised approach, which we would test with members first from the start of the new financial year.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I absolutely appreciate that work has been happening behind the scenes there. And thank you for that update. I think that's good. I think it's just still kind of leaves me with, in a committee's time, this action will have been outstanding for about a year. So can I just please have a firm commitment that we do whatever we need to do? And this is both for Darren and for Police Scotland, that by the next financial year we are starting into. We will have a very clear plan of when things are landing when throughout the course of the year, so that we can actually close this action out. Okay, right. Thank you for that. As I say, I fully acknowledge that things are happening, but it's just Angela. Sorry, what Angela, you'd like to come in?
So it was on another action, Katerina, the one on vetting. And I just wondered what confidence there was that version 5 would be implemented in the timescale that is highlighted in the log, and whether it would be worth the committee keeping that open. I know that there's a lot of pressure on digital, and I just wondered whether it'd be worth keeping it open until the next committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I mean, I concur. Obviously, Helen, I'd let you come in. Please, Helen.
Just to give reassurance that we are still working towards that date. There's been no delays at this point identified in respect of that, so we continue, and it really is important for us with that movement towards some of the vetting changes that are ahead as we move into 2026. So certainly no delays identified at this point.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I think that's really helpful assurance. I do concur with Angela. So one of those as well, Angela, I agree. I also had a question mark over kind of closing up on yet just before it has been implemented. So so I think we're saying as a committee we would like to keep that one open. Are there any other ones which are proposed for closure where there is any concerns or any questions from anybody? Okay, that's great. I wasn't going to pull anything else out. So other than this one, I think what I'm taking is that we're content with the ones that are proposed for closure and the ones that are proposed ongoing, with a view of closing some of those by the next committee cycle. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Then moving on, there have been no decisions taken since the last meeting. And this leads us into agenda item number 3, which is the Police Scotland Professional Standards Performance Report for Quarter 2. And Helen, I believe I'm passing over to you for this one.
Yep, you are, Chair. Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair and committee. I'm delighted to present to you today the Quarter 2 performance report to you. I will just touch on a couple of opening comments and then kind of touch on to some of the key points within the report, and then as always welcome questions. The PSD business area continues to present a busy and demanding and complex area of work, but I give my full reassurance that my team and I are focused on making sure we can continue to deliver improvements. And throughout this report there are areas of reduced volume, but I would like to highlight the pressures and volumes in workflow remain high due to some of the complexities and our continued work to try and address the queues across the PSD functions. If the reduced volume continues and resourcing remains steady, I am hopeful that we will continue to see progress in this area of PSD work. We can evidence over the last few months the increase in FLR, meaning that more matters have been dealt with swiftly, and we can also show a balancing of levels of incoming and concluded matters, as shown in chart 12 in the report. But I recognise that more needs to be done around our practices and approaches, as brought into focus by the BDO report and the lack of more progress in this area, which, whilst the queue awaiting allocation has reduced from around about 1,340 in January to just over 1,000 at the start of October, I do recognise that there is still more needing to be done so that the queue can be reduced further and we can see sustained improvements, in particular around timescales. In addition, I'm keen to continue to receive input from PERC on how we can continue to enhance and develop our approaches and recognise the role that they have in oversight of the complaint handling process and involvement in CHRs. I'm keen to continue to work with them and utilise their input to develop our approaches, and strongly believe that we need to find the balance in in understanding and application of proportionate investigations. I know that we are having these discussions with PERC, and I'm grateful to them for their engagement and hope we can continue to accelerate some of the discussions and developments and move this forward at pace. And I know we'll talk more about that at the Operation Glade item on the agenda. There are 2 significant updates as well that I would like to add on. We are seeing some of the vacancies that we've had, in particular in some of the chief inspector areas, in particular around our NCARU team, which, as the committee knows, is absolutely key in terms of that initial triage and assessment that will be filled over the forthcoming weeks. And also James Mann, who is on the screen with me, I'm delighted that he will be remaining in post on his promotion in 2 weeks. That gives us consistency and oversight in terms of management. My second update is that the Centurion system, on which, as the committee knows, that we're reliant on for the management of our complaints process, is finally due its upgrade later this month after 18 months of work. This will mark a significant step forward in this area and enhance our abilities to then consider wider technological developments in this area and refine our processes and recording practices. As we move towards the go live date in the next 2 weeks, I'm really grateful for the work of the team and of Digital Division to support the significant milestones. And I hope we will see improvements in our workflow management, which will subsequently impact on improvements in data provision and visibility within the organisation. Before I go into any further detail, I do also have to acknowledge the operational impacts and abstractions with the recent move towards the force mobilisation model, which clearly supports the delivery of frontline and operational policing through deployments across the corporate services functions, and something that we very much support. But I do give the committee the reassurance that we will track and monitor the abstractions of officers into operational duties, and we will continue to monitor that. We are 2 weeks in relation to PSD involvement in that. So as I say, as I work through the report, I'll pull out the key areas of change, and I give you the committee the reassurance we remain resolute in our determination to continue to address the queue and the swift and proportionate progression of matters. So touching firstly on page 1 and the summary of our preventions activity, I think it's always important just to highlight the huge amount of work within this space, the events that we're organising, the in-person CPD event for superintendents where we spoke about DSI referrals, the PECS Act, PIP implications, the continued work through our newsletter, most recently focusing, the standard newsletter, most recently focusing on irregularity in procedure, how we share the CHR learning across the organisation, and also our engagement sessions. We continue to work to improve the visibility of PSD matters across the organisation, and this is a real focus for me as we kind of continue to try and build forward in terms of early intervention work and changing behaviours. I next want to jump to page 5 within the report, where it gives you the outline in terms of the complaint received and the reduction in volume that we are seeing across Q1 and Q2 of this year. So as articulated in the report, it's 2,806 complaints received, which does indicate a reduction from the spike in complaints received in the previous years. We obviously do rerun the data in advance of this just to see whether there is anything else since the report has been completed, and there is a small number of additional complaints added in relation to that. So in terms of the full caps, as shown at the moment, it's just over 3,000. So it's 3,004 caps received in the first 2 quarters. So a difference of 198 compared to the committee's report. But this is still showing a clear decrease from the previous year to date of 810 complaints and a decrease over the 5-year average. We also do have some matters continuing within the NCARU assessment queue, which we are continuing to work through, and we anticipate possibly between another 30 to 40 caps to be added into that. So there is a few more that will potentially appear in that figure in future reporting. In terms of the NCARU queue and just touching on that, we continue to see a regular influx of matters coming into the NCARU, but as I've spoken about, an increase in terms of FLR, and we are working towards ensuring that the teams are trying to clear approximately 40 matters per day, but there is quite significant variance from 55 down to 25, just depending on some of the complexities and demand. But I wanted to take an opportunity to give the reassurance to the committee about some of the measures that we are putting in place to help us drive through some of the sustained improvements that we are hoping to see. So 1,548 complaints were subject to FLR during the year to date, which is an increase from 48.6% up to 55.2%. And in particular, this increase is shown by FLR within the NCARU team. And this is reflected in terms of that realignment of resources into the NCARU to support those initial assessments, enabling swift and satisfactory resolution for a large number of complainers. In terms of the overall decrease, I would like to advise that we are seeing decrease in complaints across all areas within the organisation. And I would like to just provide a little bit of extra context for the committee in respect of that. So we are seeing, as shown in chart 3, the continued downwards trajectory since the peak of the spike seen. And we have done a comparison over the last year against the previous year, just using as a rough measure, just to give the committee an indication. So we are seeing substantial decreases that are visible across all divisions, with none specifically identified as having disproportionately contributed to the decrease. Although the volume of reduction in on-duty allegation almost mirrors that of quality of service in terms of a reduction, the percentage reduction in quality of service is significantly higher at 31.4% compared to 13.7%. We do also reflect on quality of service was a key driver in the increase in the spikes. So we would expect more of a decrease within that area, but that is positive to see. So it is assessed that the reduction of quality of service is the primary driver in the reduction in complaints overall. Both service delivery and service outcome allegations have reduced significantly as well. And the most influential subtypes here are the time of response and lack of satisfaction with action taken, where we have seen reductions there as well. So it should also just highlight that within all subtypes within service delivery and service outcomes have decreased by over 200 allegations in this reporting period, except for policing presence, which is a relatively low one within it as well. In addition, irregularity and procedure allegations have reduced substantially as well. And the other one that I would note is assault allegations, a notable increase there as well, which influences to a lesser degree the overall reduction in complaint volumes, and is also reflected in Article 3 referrals to PERC, which I will touch on later in the performance report. In terms of moving into the emerging trends, we've spoken at length about some of these at recent committees, and I just wanted to focus on this one on excessive force, but clearly happy to touch on any of the other ones that the committee would like to explore. So 357 allegations of excessive force received year to date, which represents a decrease from the previous year to date of 9, but crucially an increase from the 5-year average. Excessive force was highlighted in previous committees of being an increase of note, and the first 2 quarters have continued that trend. The year-to-date increase is, however, most influenced by increases in Forth Valley, North East and Greater Glasgow, as listed in the report. At a previous committee, I spoke about North East Division and highlighted some of the areas within that. And I would just also reassure the committee that we continue to share the data as well with the Police Scotland Use of Force Monitoring Group for their consideration. However, in terms of the current year to date, it is the increase in Forth Valley that we have done a deeper dive in relation to that, given the notable spike. A total of 34 allegations exceeds the previous year to date and the 5-year average, which are 15 and 13 respectively. And we are showing 34 allegations this year. So we have reviewed that, and I've shared this with the divisional commander for the division for further discussion in relation to any areas for awareness for the division to take forward. Of note, within the key themes year to date, I would highlight there were 12 that related to use of force on the arms. The majority of these involved tightness of the application of handcuffs, which was 9 out of the 12. There was also 10 that related to the body in general, and that was generally use of the hands by subject officers in relation to a technique being used by the officer, including sort of being kind of dragged or pushed in relation to obviously trying to effect arrest within that. And then also to the head, accounted to 6 of them, which was around sort of striking the face to the ground following some sort of technique used by the officer. So as I say, I've recently shared this with the divisional commander, and we continue to share these points with the use of force monitoring group. So volumes will continue to be monitored, and clearly any further detailed analysis will be carried out as required. So moving now on to page 10 and service delivery, allegations upheld are at a decreased rate of 15.5%, but this is relatively stable when we compare to the previous year to date and the 5-year average. The higher volume categories and subtypes are listed in the report for your awareness. However, these do mirror the typically high volume categories of allegations received. We continue to feed themes and trends of upheld complaints through the P&P Ops group for consideration of preventions messaging, training or action required, and change to policy and procedure. And this work continues to develop and progress. I do want to touch on timescales compliance, and in my opening comments, obviously, I made note of the urgent need for us to improve and enhance our timescales. 12.7% of the 300 non-criminal complaints closed within the 56 days, and this does remain below the 5-year average. In relation to that, we do want to continue to show progress within this area. One of the things James and I have spoken to the committee about is the fact that we are seeing a huge increase in closure of cases. And I wanted to highlight to the committee that I can recognise that that is not reflected in this report in terms of the 300 non-criminal complaints closed. So I'd like to highlight to the committee that there are currently 348 non-criminal complaints awaiting closure on our system when we wrote this report. As such, that could be added to the 300 non-criminal caps closed, which gives us 648 non-criminal caps closed over that first 2-year period. This is one of our challenges, that where we make improvements and developments in one area, it has a knock-on, and our focus has been on recording and trying to then investigate and progress matters in relation to this and concluding them, as opposed to then concluding them on the Centurion system. So I give the committee hopefully that reassurance around that volume, and that should show through in subsequent reports as we move forward, and will show an increase that James and I are telling you about, showing within the figures in terms of those matters. So that backlog, in terms of the closure backlog, which is an internal on our system matter, will be contributing just to that overall number of matters that are closed. And obviously we know, as I've said, the time frame, and we will continue to work to try and improve this. I do think when the upgrade work really did accelerate this year, obviously we were dealing with the allocation points at a kind of longer period, which will have influenced on that. So again, I hope to see, as we're dealing with more current matters, albeit still a queue that we are working through, hopefully those timeframes will show greater improvement. We have provided more detail on the upgrade caseload within the report to show some of that, obviously supported by the detail that is shown in the upgrade. And I won't touch any further, given we've got upgrade later on the agenda. My final couple of comments focus on the service delivery side of things, and I think it's important to recognise the increase in the CHRs, and I know that I'm sure Perk will touch on that as well, and we continue to work through these. There's no individual reviews that are assessed to have caused any significant skew in terms of the percentage reasonably handled, and we continue to review and try and identify learning and take on board points being raised within that. I think it's worthy of note that the majority of the recommendations coming back relate to further inquiry or further response required, and some of that aligns to the proportionate response that we are trying to implement in relation to these matters, and my opening comment around that continued engagement with PERC that we will continue to work forward. I will just touch on that we recognise that the complaints user satisfaction survey has also dropped slightly compared to the previous year to date, and I do, my understanding in relation to some of the impacts given some of the timescales, and we will continue to monitor that with regards to that. The report goes on to outline the PERC referrals, a total of 187 statutory referrals, an increase of 14.7 of previous year to date, mainly driven by armed policing and serious injury following police contact in relation to that. And I do have a bit more detail on the breakdown, should the committee like to hear that. Of the 187 referrals, 9.6 have progressed to a PERC investigation. I will just touch on the Article 3 referrals, because I noted the reduction in assault matters early in the earlier in the report, and to give the reassurance to the committee. So the volume of referrals has dropped sharply in relation to Article 3 and assault complaints, and this is obviously reflected throughout the report. Indications are that this is across the whole of Police Scotland and is not specifically linked to any division. But it is a reduction that, while it is positive to see, I do think we need to continue to closely monitor it. And I would like to give the committee the reassurance that there has been no change in our processes or policies around this, and that we continue as per the instruction, the Crown instruction, to refer the matters through to PERC when there is any Article 3 or assault consideration within it. In addition, considering some of the factors that we will keep an eye on, but these can't be viewed in isolation, having contributed to this is the rollout of body-worn video, but we know we're still in an earlier stage, but we will continue to monitor that, and that is only present in some divisions at this point. The Act Don't React training as well, which is rolling out across the organisation with the divisions that have seen within that, but again, it is not an explanation for the national reduction in its isolation. Developments and changes within the officer safety training that's delivered, and again we're linking in with the OST team to see if any of that can correlate to some of that, and obviously continue to monitor closely the excessive force. But as I say, the importance and the reassurance I want to give the committee is that the role in the NCARU in terms of that assessment process, taking time with the complainers to detail the distinction between assault and excessive force, with the continued emphasis to inform the complainer in terms of in terms of their complaint, so that there can be that decision in relation to the categorisation and the root of the complaint. And we remain complainer-led in this space due to the standing Crown instruction and it being the right thing to do, and there has been no change in our approach. I continue to speak to my criminal team, who continue to receive matters which are viewed as excessive force by the complainer, but just to do that double check in terms of that, whether there's any element of criminality that needs to be assessed through to PERC, and we continue to monitor. And then finally, the conduct detail that is detailed on page 12 and 13 of the report. Obviously, we are showing that increase in terms of the number of suspensions, and I know we will talk about that in more detail within the closed section of the report. But I give the committee the reassurance about our continual assessment in terms of each of the cases. We have seen an increase in terms of those matters related to domestic allegations within that, and I want to highlight the positive about people coming forward and reporting these matters, and I hope it gives them reassurance about the thoroughness of our investigation as we work through these matters. We have seen a reduction in restricted officers as well, that I would just highlight in respect of that. And then finally, within the report, drawing into the hearings and meetings that have been held in that quarter, and I'm very happy to expand on any detail or answer any questions with regards to that. And the report concludes with our standard newsletter, sharing that with the committee, and also the key points of learning. So I hope that's been useful for the committee, just to pull out a couple of the key points, and I welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you for that very much, Helen. That was again comprehensive report and a comprehensive sort of voiceover narrative. I would like to open it up to my colleagues to see if there are any questions specifically on this agenda item. As I say, there is a lot of material there, and it is helpful to kind of have your own analysis and some of the deeper dives, just because of the complexity of the complaints data that I suppose you capture. So that's quite good. Are there any comments or questions just now for Helen? Angela, please.
So thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. I mean, thanks, Helen. You can tell just how much effort and energy is going into this whole area, so I do appreciate it. I think, as somebody said previously, we know that there's always going to be ongoing complaints. It's how we learn from them and how quickly we deal with them that's key in terms of public reassurance. So well done, particularly in the front line resolution. That's good. I have a couple of questions I just wanted to seek clarification on. In the report, there's no page on it, otherwise I'd ask it, but it's in relation to the service delivery, PSD service delivery dashboard. It there's 187 referrals to PERC, 14.7% as an increase on last year, but 83% required no investigation. I just wondered what type of analysis has been undertaken on those ones that didn't proceed to investigation, to see what we might learn in terms of passing on that understanding to others in terms of, you know, what has to go to PERC. And I know that it's a bit more complicated than that, but it'd just be good to understand so that we're a bit more proportionate in it. There was also a reference in it to insufficient inquiry into ongoing complaints, and it was referred back to Police Scotland. I just wondered, has that element been analysed to any extent to see, are there particular types of complaints that repeatedly come forward that I suppose police officers are thinking it isn't the priority that we need to really tackle, so therefore it's almost kind of left to the side a wee bit, but it still has to go forward as part of an investigation into the complaint. I'm not really explaining that, but I was just thinking, are there types of issues such as certain crimes or whatever where police officers are thinking there are just so many that we cannot go into that in any detail, and if there's a complaint, there's a complaint, we're going to have to deal with it. That's my thing. And I just, in that respect, I was thinking, well, maybe there is something that we just say, look, given the resources that we've got, these are the kind of things that we just cannot get round to, tragic as it is, and be a bit more open about it. And I'll leave it at that. I have got another couple, but I see Chris has got his hand up, so I'll leave it at that just now.
Thank you very much for your questions there in relation to that. So firstly, in relation to the referrals through to PERC, what's really important for us is that if it meets the criteria, we have that real transparency in relation to passing that over to PERC for them to carry out that assessment. I will say not everything that comes into PSD always meets that threshold in terms of the criteria, in which we would then pass it through. And we are doing sessions across the organisation to support superintendents with that decision making in relation to, and the operational superintendents, about what needs to come across to PSD and what doesn't. We're always very happy as well for people to pick up the phone and have a conversation with us or refer the matter, because I think it's always worth that that review, because actually we can sometimes identify learning for matters that don't need to go to PERC as well, and we implement that as well. And more recently we have introduced an improvement in terms of making sure that's captured so that we have that organisational learning. So I guess those are those ones that come into us that we assess and have a look at, and there is no cause or contributory factor in relation to the police action, but sometimes there can be some learning points that are being identified, and hopefully in the future learning report we might be able to share some more detail around some of that with the committee. The other bit I would say is that obviously, you know, we are important for, we do view it as important for that transparency from a PERC perspective. And I can touch on some of the things, so a little bit more detail to give you. So for example, the increase in serious injury following police contact, 40% of those relate to the individual trying to evade arrest by police. So this might be jumping out of a window, or making off on foot, tripping over and sustaining an injury in respect of that. That, you know, from discussion with PERC, they are keen to make sure that they see those ones in terms of that causal contributory factor within that. But a lot of those will come back in relation to obviously the proportionate police action with regards to that. So I think it's a conversation that we continue to have with PERC, and to make sure that we are being transparent in our approach and referring them across, and that PERC have that opportunity to assess and then feedback to us on it. But I think it's one that we will continue that discussion with PERC. So I hope that answers your first query in relation to the PERC referral, and hopefully gives you the reassurance about the different points in which we identify learning. Your second question in relation to insufficient inquiries within the complaint allegations, if I've picked you up correctly within that, I think that is a really important one for us to continue to monitor. And part of the work that I'm keen to do is to make sure that is more visible, so that if there are key trends or patterns, we can address those through messaging to officers involved. So I think it's a really valid point that you've raised. I don't know the exact answer to exactly if there are any underlying parts of that, but I'm very happy to take that away.
Are you satisfied? Angela seems
No,
satisfied.
thank you. That's really useful, Helen. And my question is really aimed at, is there more public reporting that we could do that would give that level of reassurance? Because what you've just said is hugely reassuring, and I just think that making that that clearer explanation about why some of these things happen, I think would counter some of the press that Police Scotland gets about the time delays, quite frankly. So there's maybe something there that in future we could think about. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, both. Chris, please.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, thank you for the report and the presentation. As Angela said, really helpful, and appreciate all of the work that is being done. I know in terms of, I guess, the issue of complaints decreasing and timescales not moving necessarily in the right direction. We'll come to that under the Opblade report, and I would like to ask a question there. But just three specific questions. And so the first is just around the increase in frontline resolution, which, and I apologies if this sounds like I'm pouring cold water on progress. I don't mean to. Obviously, it is welcome, but I'm keen to hear anything you might have to say about how we, as we see that trend moving in the right direction, we manage any risks associated with that. My second question is around the discriminatory behaviour allegations and the decrease, particularly in the race subtype. And I know we've touched on this in the rolling action log, but I'm just keen for anything that you have to say about what we understand is driving that decrease and how we can sustain it. Is that related to the to the work we discussed in relation to the rolling action log? And then just a point of detail for me, there's probably ignorance on my part in some respect. So in terms of irregularity, allegation type regularity procedure, you refer to the subtypes there and the highest volume, and the other there is 400, which is obviously a considerable number, and I'm just not clear, what might be in that 400 other. I don't know if you can shed any light on that so that I can understand that a little bit better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. I will start with answering the second one, if that's sorry. I will start with answering the second one around the discriminatory elements, and then I will bring James in relation to the FLR one with regards to that, because he can really give you that assurance in terms of that direct links in with the team and how we're working for that. And then we will come back to the irregularity and procedure. So around the discrimination, I think we need to really keep the focus on in terms of our working with the policing together, because we want people to have the confidence to report to us. So there has been some work that I've been taking forward just around actually what is in our response letters to people as well, in order to help build that confidence. So, give them the reassurance around the policing together work that's happening, and also actually around things like our early intervention. So this is when officers have got 4 complaints against them. We will do an early intervention to highlight these, and obviously we would look for patterns and trends, should it be discriminatory or something like that. So because that could be a performance matter, or it could be something else that we need to take forward. So I think we need to keep an eye in relation to that, and continue to take the advice. Then obviously the work that we're going to do with the SPA audit side of things, just in relation to that as well. So I share your thoughts on that one, and I think it's important we continue to progress that. James, I'll pass over to you for the question in relation to the FLR, please.
No problem, ma'am, and thanks for the question, Chris. So in terms of FLR, the team continue, I'll give you the reassurance that the team continue to apply that method of resolution appropriately. Mainly for category C, low risk complaints, and I do encourage the team to put phone calls in as early as possible. on allocation. They work on a process of incidents of note. So if something in terms of a complaint submission meets that criteria, that gets dealt with on the same day, and if not, it gets dealt with as soon as possible thereafter. And I feel that by putting the phone call in or making a reach out to the member of the community as early as possible will assist with that FLR process. So it's very much risk-based and risk-assessed in terms of what the complaint is. And I do ask the team to do a bit of research round about the higher risk complaints before they go into the complainer, and for the lower risk complaints, reach out as soon as practical to discuss it and ensure at all times it's risk-based and really putting it complainer-led. So I do hope to see that FLR rate for October. It was 60% just for the month of October. So I hope to keep it around that figure, and if not, look at ways to increase it moving forward.
Thank you, James, for that. Sorry, Chair, would you like me to come in and answer the third
Yes, please.
part? Okay, so jumping back to the irregularity in procedure with regards to that, and the other, I guess, one of the things, and again, I'm happy to bring back a more detailed breakdown with regards to that, is the irregularity in procedure part where we capture the other side of things, is because there is just such a range within that. So, you know, when it doesn't obviously fit into one of the other categories, we would then look at bringing it in within that other categorization. And as I say, it's such a wide allegation type within the irregularity and procedure. You know, so some of the more common ones we see, the, you know, complainer being subject to police action, lack of police action, and matters around productions. And then when we look at some of the other ones, no reason provided for police attendance during incidents, failure to explain statutory requirements, that there's quite a list. So I'm very happy to take that as an action and bring to the next one a little bit more of a breakdown around those 400.
Okay. Are you satisfied with that, Chris?
Thanks very much, Helen and James. Thank you, Chair. That's responses are very helpful. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, and thank you for the offer, Helen. I think it would be helpful just again to refresh us, because I guess I'm quite conscious we do have new committee members as well. And I remember when I first joined the committee, there was a fair bit of work in terms of really understanding what is all encompassed in this. So I think that would be really quite a very, very, very helpful refresher for all of us. Paul, you would like to comment?
I'm going to come back to frontline resolution. So there was 55.2%, which is 1,500 complaints frontline resolved. Now, I'm doing the 48.6 times 3,814 for last year's past year today, and I make that 1,853 roughly. So that's about 300 cases fewer frontline resolved this year. So I'm going to pour a bit of cold water on that. So that seems like fewer are being resolved. It's a bigger percentage, but it's actually fewer cases. It's just an observation.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair. You know, and thank you for that observation. I guess what we're keen to show is that proportion of matters that are coming in relation to that. So obviously, seeing the reduction in terms of the volume, I can take on board the points. We are, as I say, trying to look at the whole picture, and I know we'll come into this in some of the upgrade points later. But no, thank you.
But it's just, you know, it's presented as a very positive picture. And on one level it is, but we've just to be cognizant of that it isn't. It's a fewer number physically or whatever numerically that are being resolved, and I don't know if that is a concern or not. Maybe we'll touch on that later on.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for doing the maths, Paul. Really helpful. Okay. Very good. Right. So I think some of the questions. Oh, Angela, you would like to come back in, please?
I would, thank you. Just very briefly, and my questions will get lesser as we go through some of the items, I promise. I just wonder, the standard newsletter that is referred to, I wonder if that is something that might be available to the committee members, just in light of what Katerina was saying, to promote understanding. It might be useful just to see what's in that. It was in relation to the ongoing learning. I haven't written this down. Yeah, learning, sharing the learning from the complaints handling reviews. That was what it was. And I just wondered whether that, and you refer to a newsletter in the report as well, whether we might be able to see that so that we can understand what learning is cascaded through the organisation.
Helen.
Yes, no, thank you. Always very happy to share those. And we do try and attach within Appendix B the standard newsletter on this particular report. And then also the gross misconduct outcomes is the other one, but that has not been published in time for this particular report on this one. And then along with that, we obviously put out the learning from the PERC matters as well, and try and capture all of that in. So we will certainly very supportive of trying to continue to provide that, and I do think the visibility of that is really important. So I completely agree with your comments. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you both. Paul, you still got your hand up. I reckon this must be a legacy hand. Yep, okay, legacy hand, that's great. Okay, well, I think, so some of the questions I had have been answered. I think the other observation you did touch on as well, Helen, is that organizational learning data. I think you yourself said that there is organizational learning that's happening. You're thinking about how to make it more visible. We just touched on the standard, which will contain some of this organizational learning, but I suppose it probably isn't, it's presented in sort of case studies. I noticed that in the report that we get, what we primarily have is this, on page 15, you have organizational learning, and that's learning identified with PERC, CHRs, and discretionary decisions, and then via the PERC investigation report recommendations. So it is just one of those elements. And I think, you said to yourself, you're looking at this. So how is it, and you said, I think if I got it correctly, you recently introduced again more systems to make sure that that's quite systematically captured. So again, whenever that is ready from a systems perspective, if some of that could be filtered into our reporting on a regular basis, again, that would just help us really close the loop, because if you're strengthening the capture of that organizational learning and dissemination this internally, the more we can kind of get that assurance at a governance level that it is happening, and it is happening not just on the back of PERC, but on the back of all of that, work that you're doing with complaints. I think that would give everybody from a public interest perspective an even greater insight into the fact that there is some value that's coming from, not just to the complainants, but to the wider system, from actually learning from these complaints as well. So just I suppose a plea for me for that organizational learning piece to be really strengthened, because I think this report has come on leaps and bounds. The data we're getting is much, much better. The narrative we're getting with it is much better. Organizational learning is that kind of element that I think, you yourself have said you're looking at capturing it in a better way, and we would quite like to see that as well. Okay.
Yep. No, thank you, Chair, for those comments. And it is something that I feel so passionately about, and I know my team do as well. So we will continue to develop that. And I hope at the next committee, when we bring maybe a wider paper or ability to add to the performance report, we can evidence that. So thank you.
Good. Okay, thank you very much for that. So I think I see no further questions on this. And yeah, we've kind of been saving a lot of the operational delivery. We're saving up for Obstacle 8, which I think makes sense to kind of cover under that agenda item. So this enables us now to move on to the SPA report. And Darren, I believe I'm passing over to you for this one.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the paper as read as usual. And just draw out a few key points. So this is our regular SPA quarterly report, which includes key statistics reflecting the position at the end of Q2 and includes comparison to the previous 7 quarters. So in terms of the quarterly performance report itself, which is at Appendix B, so again, in the context of a generally low volume of relevant complaints and associated with allegations, numbers remain largely consistent over the 8-quarter period. Whilst the majority of those do relate to senior police officers, again, the volumes remain low. 68% of our allegations rate to on-duty complaints, with the remainder to complainers' dissatisfaction with quality of service received. We talked about frontline resolution a moment ago. Our equivalent term is early stage resolution, and that continues to be an effective means of addressing complaints of a less serious nature. That accounts for 28% of the allegations closed during the period. For those allegations which require a formal determination, 27% of allegations were upheld over that period. For the complaints closed, 6 were out with the 40 working day target, and further details provided within the report, and a high level explanation explaining the reason for the delay there. And finally, 3 relevant complaints were ongoing at the end of the quarter. Moving on to the broader report, as kind of mentioned during the action log, following recruitment into my team, we have now recommenced the process of quarterly dip sampling. This follows the last exercise, which looked at cases closed in Q3 of 23-24. So the process has now resumed, and with a review of a sample of cases closed by Police Scotland in Q1 of this financial year. I'm not going to go into detail. A high-level summary is included in the covering report, and Appendix C provides much more granular detail. I think that the key thing to emphasise is that in terms of the findings and high-level recommendations included within there, they are broadly consistent with those that have been identified as part of our earlier dip sampling exercises, and also in the earlier joint SP and PERC audit of triage of complaints, and then the more recent PERC audit of the 6-stage process. So consistent findings and recommendations remain as previously. We have shared that report in with Police Scotland. We're grateful for their support and cooperation in undertaking the dip sampling exercise. We've checked the findings with them and obviously shared the recommendations, and be keen to speak with them about those in more detail via the National Complaint Handling Development Group. So that moving on to the Complaint Handling Development Group, that last met on the 20th of August. I've provided a written update, although when we last met in September, I did provide a verbal update there as well. And we are due to meet again on the 27th of November. We've tried to schedule these meetings in kind of close succession to the committee to pick up on any kind of key matters that are raised by members there. In addition, I presented to the PSD's recent induction course on the role of the authority in respect of matters of complaints and conduct, and my team also had the benefit of participating in the induction more fully as new members of the team, and benefiting from input from both Police Scotland in terms of the wider system, but also from the PERC in terms of understanding clearly their expectations. We had one PERC CHR outcome that was received during Q2. That made a number of recommendations, as well as identifying a number of learning points, and further details will be included in a future report following conclusion. Additionally, I continue to attend the Op-Glade group, which most recently met in September. And obviously noting the item on the agenda. And then lastly, as covered, I'm continuing to engage with Police Scotland in respect of the committee work plan, noting the addition of the new thematic annual reports and the potential to review the proportionality of data reporting frequency. So I'll stop there and happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you very much for this, Darren. Again, really helpful. As usual, you say that the complaints volumes for the SP don't really change quite so much, and so it's kind of difficult to kind of pull out any trends really as such. And yeah, really welcome the addition of the outcome of the dip sampling exercise as well as an appendix, obviously, to your report. So thank you for that. I would like to see if any colleagues have got any questions on your report. Apologies, the view on my screen just changed, so don't have all of you now on my screen. I think, Angela, did you raise your hand? You did. Angela, would you like to come in? Thank you. Angela, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Darren, thank you for the report. I thought it was really comprehensive, and the Appendix C was the one that I really thought was most insightful. So can I just ask, it might not be you, but on page 4, the bottom of page 4, there is reference to, and I've just lost the paper now, so bear with me. Yeah, frontline resolution. and you've covered that in your opening statements. But you draw attention to the fact that the figure is impacted by one case which took 669 days to close. Can I just ask for some assurance in terms of the processes that are in place to keep track of complaints and the timescale that it's taking to actually get to a conclusion with them? And my second point is in page 5, where you highlight that there was a complaint that was misplaced, resulting in significant number of days over which it was the duration of it. So I think I'd like to know about how processes are reviewed in the light of issues like this. And at the bottom of that paragraph, on the non-criminal, paragraph 4, there is a bullet point that says this area of PSD business should be viewed in the context of the current, sorry, it's not. There's a recommendation somewhere about this is an area of business that should be reviewed. And I just wondered whether or not that was something that was going to be undertaken. Sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but yeah, somebody that can answer that?
Thanks, Angela. I'll come in first, and then I'm going to probably just defer to, I suppose, my team if they've got anything they want to add in, and then probably looking to colleagues in Police Scotland. So I think, more broadly, a number of these things relate to records management, effective records management, and as I mentioned, our earlier DIP samples and the recent joint PERC and PERC audits have similarly commented on the same. I am thoughtful that when James came into post recently, he has covered with the committee previously a significant housekeeping exercise that was undertaken, and that may well account for having captured some of these things and also probably strengthened processes that have been put in place under James's leadership. But I would probably defer to Helen and to James in the first instance. But as I say, recognising that we will continue to do these DIP samples and to engage with colleagues in Police Scotland and the PERC in terms of follow-up thereafter.
Thank you, Darren. Can anybody from Police Scotland comment on parts of Angela's question? James, please.
Thank you, and thanks, Angela, for the question. Yeah, just to give you the reassurance that we do have methods of keeping track of where complaints are and at what stage they are at, via different methods, via SharePoint, our own internal system, and also via Centurion. We're continuing with meetings across our own non-criminal and our administration teams to ensure our administration processes across both areas, so my responsibility and also administration, are as efficient as they can be, and we're looking to implement some changes over the next month or two after the Centurion upgrade. So just to give you that assurance that I'll continue to work on that and make sure our housekeeping is as good as it can be.
Thanks, James and Darren, that's great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think Chris, I saw you raise your hand as well. Would you like to come in, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks again, Darren, for the report. I think it's possibly a comment as much as a question, really, but obviously I'm mindful of the theme that runs through the report and the appendix in terms of capturing equality and diversity information, and recognise from long experience in a whole range of areas the challenges in relation to the capture of equality and diversity information. But welcome the recommendation. Whatever the reasons are, in terms of information being shared at the discretion of complainers and so on, it does seem to me critical that we have as much of that information as possible. So it's really a comment as much as a question, but anything that anybody wants to say in relation to that would be helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, I'm happy to kind of comment and then come back to Police Scotland. So obviously, I'm very thoughtful of the PERC statutory guidance when it was revised, had a particular focus around about equalities, and also the committee have been very keen as well to kind of have a better understanding of any kind of themes linked to complaints raised by people from particular groups, and those complaints might not necessarily be complaints about discriminatory behaviour. So it's recognised that Police Scotland have built into the process the expectation that people are asked to provide information. And obviously that there's no obligation on people to do so. I think within the report, what we found was an inconsistency in terms of a record of whether people had in fact been asked, but also looking at ways in which, like we've done with our SPA process, where within our own complaint capture process, initially when people submit a complaint, there's an ability for them to capture EDI information within that, and it's separated out, but it automates an aspect of that process up front. So there may be opportunities there for Police Scotland in that regard, as we've suggested. I think the other thing, though, and again, probably for Helen and James to comment on, I'm also aware that there's a kind of an imminent development around about the Centurion system, which will additionally sort of support this data capture process. So hopefully I've got that correct, folks, but I'll pass over to Police Scotland.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've got both Helen and James want to come in. I think Helen.
I'll touch and then hand over to James if anything. And I think that is the key point, that the Centurion upgrade is a significant change for us in relation to their also kind of should then be replicated obviously in terms of our complaint handling form and how all of these matters are captured. And then we know, I think it was around about this time last year, we revised that complaint handling form as well in respect of that. So I guess we are keen just to continue to develop ways in which that works. And I do hope that the upgrade to Centurion will help facilitate some of that. I don't know, James, if you've got anything further to add.
Yeah, thanks, ma'am. Just to add in a wee bit of further detail, so I continue to encourage the NCARU, the resolution team, to record and capture such data as we're referring to. And I think it's probably to be mindful of the fact that we're still working with a relatively new team in terms of our civilian investigators, and some of them are helping out, working in NCARU. And we've had some new team members come in for people that have went out in promotion, etc. So it's just to encourage them and ensure that they are capturing the relevant details before it goes to the Centurion system. And as the boss said, hopefully with the upgrade, that will help things moving forward. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chris, for the question. Thank you, Police Scotland, for the answers. Okay, I do not see any further hands up on this specific agenda item. Just kind of some of my observations is that, obviously when we speak about the Police Scotland handling of complaints, we do refer quite often to the statistics around the PERC complaint handling reviews. Now for the SPA, we don't have many of those. I think this time around in the report down under 2.5, you do set out that we've had one, and there will be some organizational learning from that coming our way as well. And it will be reported following the implementation of some of the recommendations. So at that stage, when we are ready, I actually quite look forward to having a discussion as well, because we are not immune, and so it's, again, I welcome that feedback from PERC that they deliver through a complaint handling review as well. So again, a rare occurrence for us, not because we're perfect, but just because we don't have many of them kind of coming our way. But that's recognize that has been flagged, and we will have a more fuller discussion around that at a later stage as well. Okay, right, so thank you for that. I think it means that we can move on to agenda item 5, and that is the PERC report on Police Scotland handling of complaints and referral investigations. And I believe, again, we are due in for a double act of Ilya and Raymond, if I'm correct. So I think in usual style, I believe, Ilya, I'm passing over to you first. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'll provide a brief update on the review section of our report. The committee will note that 76 CHR applications were received in Q2, significant increase on the previous financial year. In terms of comparing simply Q2, 38% increase. But if we're looking at the mid-year point, we're probably looking at about 45% increase in the CHR applications. During the relevant period, we issued 37 CHR reports, and the committee will note a slight improvement in terms of complaints reasonably handled. During Q2, that figure rose to 49%, up on 43% that we reported in the previous quarter. During the same period, we concluded another 33 CHR cases by the discretionary decision. The report contains a breakdown of our learning points and recommendations. I think, generally speaking, the trends that we reported in Q1 persisted into Q2. Overall, 76 recommendations were made. 43 of those asked Police Scotland to conduct further inquiries, with another 24 recommendation asked police to reassess the available information and provide further response. In Q2, we also issued 4 reconsideration direction. I understand there was perhaps a omission of that in the report. I apologise for that. But in total, for the year to date, the number of the reconsideration direction is now 7, 3 in Q1 and 4 in Q2. There is a breakdown of the learning points. You will see highlighting some good practice and also highlighting some areas where we're hoping for a little bit of improvement in terms of frontline resolution and communication with the complainers, and also sufficiency of the inquiries, which aligns with our recommendations. Detailed breakdown of our engagement with Professional Standards Department is included. You will note that the next round of practitioner forums took place on the 29th of October at the PERC office, and I can tell that the follow-up practitioner forums are taking place today in the north of Scotland, just making sure that all members of Professional Standards Department have an opportunity to engage and attend those events. Additionally, we assisted Professional Standards Department in delivery of the induction training at the end of October for new recruits. And that's probably all the highlights from my update. You will see there's still a number of recommendations outstanding from the 6-stage audit. We have had some further meetings with James and his team, so I'm hopeful that we will make some progress in Q3 in that regard. But that probably concludes my section of the report. I'm quite happy to take some questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Lee. As usual, again, we're quite used to seeing this data. It's really helpful that it comes to us on a quarterly basis. And again, your voiceover is incredibly helpful as well, just to help to put a little bit of context around this and some just extra flavour. So that's good. I would like to see if there's any questions on this particular section of the PERC update. And again, colleagues, please bear with me. I can't see any hands up. So, oh, Angela, sorry, apologies. Angela, I spoke too soon. Angela, please do come in.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
Thank you for the report. I am still very much learning in this area, so I find it really, really interesting. I'm particularly interested, page 17. And you comment on the recommendations that you've made and the ones that have been adopted, and highlight the 4 that have actually been implemented. And you then go on to talk about a further 4 recommendations could be implemented and discharged by the end of Q4. These staff changes, due to staff changes within PSD, that didn't happen. So I just wondered where we were in the progress towards that. I know it's not a question for you, but perhaps Police Scotland colleagues can answer. yeah, where are we with the implementation of the recommendations made in your audit?
James, you'd like to come in on this?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Angela. Myself, Elia and the team at Park and some of my team met a couple of days ago just to go over the recommendations that are outstanding and see what needs done to propose them for closure. So in summary, and I can go through this in more detail if required off table, but there's a recommendation 2, 3, 6 and 7 have all got now minimal work to be done. Some of them overlap with the BDO audit as well, so that they will be captured there. I'm going to set up a kind of short life working group and I'll chair that to discharge the actions from the BDO audit. So there is some overlap with these. But the main substantive recommendation for moving forward is the recommendation 8, which is the key performance indicators around about timescales for each allegation category for complaints. So I will work on that with the Chief Inspector from the West for non-criminal, and we'll take a proposal back to PERC just to see if there's support for those timescales before we move forward with that. So that's the main substantive one that's outstanding, recommendation 8, and the rest, as I say, are minimal that we can propose for closure through the next quarter. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for the question. Thank you, James, for answering it. Okay. Right. I don't think I've got any further hands up. So I think, Raymond, we're ready to move on to your part of the report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very much in line with you. Yes, mine's will be short and sharp. We'll take the document as read, if that's okay with the committee. You'll notice on page 19, the number of referrals has dropped. We still welcome then, in line with what Helen says, we apply a robust assessment process in that, which, whilst very few convert to investigations, it gives a trust and confidence back to Police Scotland in terms of these referrals and the need for them. Moving through the document on page 20, the chart there, I'll highlight the fact there's been 2 deaths in police custody, both in separate divisions, but the fact of the matter is we see a positive engagement in these scenarios, tragic as they are in terms of engagement between Police Scotland and PERC, and that the uplift in taking these investigations forward, so that remains welcome. The other part on that I will highlight, and whilst it's not a referral per se, public interest matters are referred to there, which is a matter exclusively for the Commissioner here, and that one, whilst they don't occur very often, relates to the death of a child, which I'll not go into, but it shows that additional oversight that PERC has in matters that occur within Police Scotland in that regard. The one area we are seeing an increase in our workload, but it is welcomed, is body-worn video. It's still been rolled out across the Police Scotland divisions, as we know. However, for all PAV and Taser discharges, we review these as we would with firearms, and it provides confidence in the use of these. However, it also shows a transparent approach in how we actually consider these, and probably more detail, provides us more detail in what we can do. So highlighting the report there is one that we probably wouldn't have picked up on just in the written format, but the body-worn video provide us with footage that showed that we then had to commence what led to a criminal investigation. So it shows the value of body-worn video in terms of, I suppose, once again referencing the trust and confidence it may catch stuff that would not have otherwise seen if it arrived just in a written format. So that is welcomed. Stepping through the report, the key performance indicators very much as read, but you'll note the last paragraph there relates to the volume of police referred matters that actually account for our investigative workload. At the moment, that only relates to 3% of our workload, so it's a very small part of our business, as you can imagine. The recommendations, I'll take them as read. The first 4 relate to a single incident, and the final one, a separate incident. The point there, obviously, for the benefit of the committee, is we now have this improved position where they're turning around within the timescales that are set, 3 months, which is reassuring. What we don't obviously see, and I've spoke about it previously, is how the recommendations then land going forward, if they're meaningful and are enacted. But Stuart Houston, the ACC, previously starting that, gave some reassurance, as you recall, that would be part of an ongoing process. And finally, stakeholder engagement. I've touched previously in the last couple of committees on the revision to our workload, given the change in the law for corroboration. I'm minded to Helen's comment on the fact that there's just short of half the referrals coming in terms of assaults or Article 3 matters based on the last 2 quarters of last year. However, we are investigating roughly about 75% of them, whereas before it was just short of 29. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward, but that is a stark change from over 200 to just over 100. So we'll watch that carefully and see how that goes. But we are investigating a much higher proportion of these matters. The other area where we have, with Police Scotland support, led to some changes is the practitioner meetings. In the absence of a CPD event last year, we would share learning and benefit experience. We have instigated practitioner meetings, and that relates to the Article 3 area of the business, and also the business as usual, as we would call it, round about the use of firearms and so on and so forth. So these appear to be working well. There's been a couple of iterations of both, and the learning's getting shared, and we will hope to see that continue. In relation to the body-worn video, to go back to that, whilst we're seeing that better understanding what actually happens in operational scenarios, we're conscious of the fact it's very early in its rollout and understand that there's going to be a revision or a review of the body-worn video SOP. So we're keen to remain engaged with that when it comes to pass. I believe it was due to be this month, but I'm unaware if that still remains the same. And other than that, I've not got a great deal to add, other than the fact that it's been on the agenda quite a few times, or certainly on the report quite a few times. The MOU between Police Scotland and PIRC is still ongoing, and I believe it just requires final sign-off. That may have happened in the last few days since the publishing of this report, but that's at the very final stages, so it would be it'd be welcomed once that's done. Then we're all working off the same document going forward. Other than that, not a great deal to add to today's submission.
Okay, well, Raymond, thank you very much again, as usual, for the report, which is always comprehensive, and the very, very helpful voiceover as well. I think it is actually quite comprehensive. It does feel like there's been a fair bit of sort of movement. So really welcome your feedback on the body-worn video. I think it's incredibly important to really recognise the importance of this capability sort of in this public forum as well. So, really, really helpful to kind of get your perspective on this. I would like to open it up to colleagues to see if colleagues have got any questions on this specifically. And again, apologies, colleagues. I am not sure if I can't see any hands up. And that is possibly entirely because you have preempted with your voiceover, Raymond, some of the questions that colleagues might have had. But as I say, yeah, from my perspective, just that you've echoed what Helen has said in terms of a reduction of referrals. As usual, you've provided the assurance that even the ones that don't proceed to investigation, there's still a robust assessment. And again, that's just always really important for us to stress that just because something is investigated, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It means there's still an assurance for Police Scotland and for the public that everything was above board for those cases. And yeah, really quite sort of really helpful to hear the fact that body-worn video has actually highlighted things that you might not have picked up otherwise. So again, it just shows that is a really valuable technology. And although, as you say, it does contribute to extra workload, the in terms of the assurance, the value is really quite high. So that's very helpful for us to hear. And I think, Darren, did you just say there has been some movement on the MOU? I think I might have seen something pop up on my screen.
Yeah, so it was submitted to Police Scotland in the first instance for signature. They've forwarded it to us today for review and signature by the Chief Exec.
Okay, fantastic. So literally hot off the press, kind of. So final stages. That's really good news as well, as I think everybody acknowledges. Good work. Okay, I see no comments, no further questions on this. Thank you so much, Raymond and Ilya, again for your very valuable update as usual. Okay. So we've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes, but I'm quite keen to get the discussion on Operations Glade still in, whilst we're still kind of before we have a little break, if colleagues don't mind, just because I think it is quite important. Yeah, Helen and James, I think it's over to you firstly for the presentation, and we can kind of get stuck into the discussion.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I am going to hand over to James to talk about the kind of the key points within the report that's been provided. I guess I would like to just reflect on obviously some of my earlier comments just around our continued commitment in this space. And it is so challenging to capture all of it, and we are trying really hard to make sure that we can present it to the committee in the best possible way, or that really articulation of the journey that we're going. One thing that keeps sort of striking me is it always feels like there is a bit of a time delay in relation to actually then the impact of some of the changes and some of the developments through it. And I know James is going to touch on some of the plans of what we've got ahead as well in relation to dealing with some of this. What's really important is that we make sure that our staff are appropriately trained and supported in dealing with these matters, so that we don't have errors, or we don't have things that then come back round through CHR. So that is a point, just given the increase in CHRs, that we do need to make sure that we do monitor and track that and pick up any learning. And then, as I say, looking at it in its totality across all of the different elements, focused on that's swift but proportionate and thorough, and I think that's really important, that complainants are getting kind of answers and responses to the points that they are raising in relation to their complaints, and then how we're sharing that in the organisation. So I'll hand over to James just to go into a little bit more of the detail within the report.
Thanks, ma'am. Thank you, Chair. Just a note to say, obviously, given the fact that I'm now staying in post, obviously delighted to stay here, and a commitment to continue to try and work through the challenge and find solutions to best serve the community of Scotland and those who complain about the police. So I'll refer just to page 2 of the report in terms of progress and updates. So 1,018 in the unallocated queue, since a decrease of 34 since the last report. I've given a breakdown there of all the categories. So a reduction in categories A+, category A, not in category B, which is the proportionate investigation teams, and the reduction in category C. In terms of proportionate investigations, we have seen quite a number of CHRs come in, as Elia reflects in his report. So continue to support the new civilian investigators who make up the majority of that team, and ensure that as we move forward, we reduce the CHRs coming from that proportionate investigation team. In terms of page 3, I've produced a more detailed breakdown as to the newly recorded non-criminal complaints for the months of August and September, as requested in the last SPA Complaints and Conduct Committee. So for August, we had 133 come from Incaru assessment into our non-criminal team, and the team completed 118 closures across all areas of non-criminal. So in terms of our upgrade totality, so our allocated and unallocated, we were at 1695, and in September we had 155 newly recorded complaints from our Incaru team, and the team completed 167, so in a positive position there for September. So therefore the overall total reduced to 1612, which is a reduction of 83. The Chief Super already touched on the Incaru demand. It was sitting at 600. However, we have managed to flex resource from non-criminal to our Incaru, and we've managed to get that down to 550 as of this morning. We continue to see demand flux between 25 to 35 new complaints per day, and I encourage the team to try and assess and triage 40 plus complaints per day, so we're in a positive position. In terms of abstractions and complexity, some days that's not achievable. However, that's the average that I look for on a weekly basis. In terms of resourcing, the Chief Super touched on the fact we're getting our new Chief Inspector in by the end of November, which is a really positive position to be in. And hopefully we move forward as a team in terms of reducing that demand with Incaru. Just to touch on probably the main talking point for the meeting, a pilot programme in terms of allocating one category B or C complaint to probationary local policing sergeants has been approved by the ACC and at divisional commanders meeting. So I'll look to now implement that project. That will see 80 complaints at category B or C level be allocated to newly promoted sergeants within local policing. I've put together a programme of awareness sessions that will take place in December, run by PSD, and we will support them with a full-time PSD inspector in terms of ensuring that they are supported to deliver the best service possible for the public in terms of those complaints they're allocated. I believe if that pilot is a success, we could roll that out further in the year of 2026, which would see our unallocated queue reduce further across the B and C complaints. So that's the most substantive update for this meeting. We continue benchmarking conversations, and Hertfordshire Police are invited to the next complaint handling development group. And I've also got a conversation on this week with Greater Manchester Police, and we continue to look for opportunities to improve our processes. In terms of the BDO audit, I touched on that I'll run a short life working group with relevant attendees to discharge those findings and ensure we implement improvements in our processes moving forward. That's the key elements of the Opglade paper I wanted to pull out and just ask if there's any questions.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, James, for the paper, for the update as well. Yeah, really important for us. And again, I'm quite mindful of the fact that some of my colleagues from the committee were in the Audit and Risk Committee, Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee that took place yesterday, where we did touch on the BDO audit a little bit. I appreciate it's not on the agenda just now because it is still quite fresh. But it is kind of quite hard to kind of be discussing this without kind of a degree of reference back to the BDO audit, and you've just did it yourself, James, as well. You've kind of given us a bit of an indication as to what you're going to do with that. What I would like to do, I think, is I probably will I would like to open it up to colleagues for questions and reflections on this first of all. And then, I'm quite keen to agree what it is that we can maybe expect to see extra in addition to this piece of work for the next committee, just in terms of, what level of visibility colleagues would like to have over what you're doing or what you're planning on doing with the BDO audit, but also maybe some of the other work as well. So I would like to firstly open it up, as I say, to colleagues just for questions, comments, discussion, conversation, and then see what we need as a committee for next time. And colleagues, over to you. So are there any questions, observations, points on this? I see, Paul, you would like to come in. Paul first and then Chris. Paul,
yeah,
please.
I mean, it's just yesterday. I mean, we did, and I don't want Groundhog Day, and conscious that, it's just unfortunate that we've got them 2 days on the bounce. But the delivery or resolution of this seems to be ponderous, and it's what we can do to turn that around, how quickly, because I think I noticed yesterday it was 5% reduction in backlog, which would take 20 years to get through. And what can we do to get that down? And if whatever actions we can do, we want to be seeing them done as quickly as we can, because it's not good. So yeah.
I think it's a relevant point. Maybe what we can do, colleagues, absolutely. I mean, Helen, I'll let you come in. I'm also thinking there may be a way for us kind of maybe pooling some of the questions. And then I don't know, Chris, if kind of your question is more specific or in a similar vein. Maybe we could ask the questions and then kind of see if Police Scotland can come back with that kind of combined response, because I think most of our heads are in a very, very similar space. So maybe, Helen, if you just hold back and Paul, maybe with your forbearance, if I bring Chris in and then we get maybe more of a kind of complete, answer. Chris, please, what were you going to come in on?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thank you, and thank you for the report and the presentation of the report, and obviously appreciate all of that. And it is absolutely helpful to have had the report and to have had the update in relation to the report. So I do want to stress that I wasn't party to the discussions yesterday. My question is in the same zone, really. It's pretty high level. I guess what I'm trying to understand as I get to grips with this as a relatively new member of this committee is in terms of the resource, and the impact of the increased resource. Is it the right resource? If it is the right resource, is it something about the way that resource is deployed, managed, and so on? This isn't about pointing fingers. I'm just genuinely trying to understand, how we can get, return on investment in terms of the resource.
No, thank you. I mean, yeah, entirely related questions. I think, as I say, the committee is, I think, quite in the same space in terms of we know that good work has happened. You know, James, you coming into post, certainly there's a lot more grip and control around this. 25, I think at least 25 new members of staff have joined the civil investigators. So all of that good work is happening, and you know, from the committee's perspective, you know, as Paul's indicated, and Chris as well, what is it that we're getting for this investment? Why isn't it moving at a faster pace? You know, I think the BDO audit has, and I see Alan's raised his hand. So, you know, I think the BDO audit, what it certainly has highlighted, to me, is it has highlighted the fact that you're quite hamstrung by your systems. I mean, that was quite a clear thing. And, you know, I know I certainly appreciated it to a degree, but I think the audit has just highlighted potentially just how much of a constraint your current system is, rather than potentially, you know, helpful. So lots of manual workarounds by the sounds of it. You know, SOPs, standard operating procedures, I think was another constant theme that was coming through in the BDO audit as well. So around, and particularly if you've had a lot of influx of people, what is it that you've been training them on in the absence of SOPs? You know, I'm sure you've been training them on other materials, but that's kind of a question. Sort of, and some of the consistency around forms not being filled in, etc., etc. Again, I would have expected, if you're having a centre of excellence and if you've got all this resource that you're training to the right standard, some of that is just a little bit puzzling. So it feels like there is a fair bit. So resource is just one part of the solution by the sounds of it, but it seems like there are broader, more underlying things that almost need to be fixed. And whether that's in relation to the backlog, or whether that's also in relation to the handling of the, what did you say, James, 25 to 35 new complaints per day that are coming in. So all of that keeps topping up, that bathtub analogy that we've used in the past. So it doesn't matter how quickly you drain it. So it's that overall underlying machinery, I think, that we're all kind of quite concerned about. And I think that's where the BDO has certainly given, you know, me and us, I think, more of an insight as to the challenges you're up against. But I think we're quite keen to have a better understanding of what you're going to do with this, because just resource doesn't seem to be, so far, it doesn't seem to have made quite the impact that we might have expected. Although I appreciate, I think, and again, apologies for referring to the committee yesterday, Helen, I think you said yesterday you might have been in a more difficult position. It might have been higher if you haven't taken the step. So it's not, you know, it is, I suppose, being critical, but hopefully in a constructive way. I think that's where the committee's head is at this overall, and I think that's what colleagues have just reflected back as well in their questions. Okay, I will pause now for breath and for an opportunity for Alan is supposed to come in as well. Alan, you wanted to come in.
Thanks, Catherine, and Helen will set, and James will go into a little bit more detail. Probably just a couple of general observations from myself, and I probably don't disagree with any of the concerns that would be raised today, nor the concerns that were raised yesterday. And Paul's assessment is absolutely right. What I would say is it's probably, you know, we're treading water through no fault of effort on the part of the team. I'm also really conscious that Helen on a couple of occasions has pushed me for some additional resource, which right now across the organisation is proving difficult to do. I think what we've got in terms of complaint handling is just a reflection of the general demand that's on professional standards. And the committee will be aware of the number of complaint handling reviews that come back into the organisation, demand a resource within PSD, the demand on the conduct space that you'll hear about today continues to be incredibly high, and the volume of work that we share across with PERC takes resource to do that. So I think it's not a helpful comment, but it's a reality that this part of the business just is reflective of the fact that we are burning fairly red hot right across the function. I welcome initiatives like probationary sergeants picking up complaints, but that in itself is helpful. It gets new sergeants into the ways of handling complaints, but it's certainly not going to be a resolution to see the number of complaints that are being driven down. So I'm certainly encouraging Helen to think far, far more creatively and innovatively, thinking about the arrangements we have. We're obviously working on a framework that PERC have got a close focus on, so there's something more we can do in that space. But I do think we do need to think much more creatively and innovatively about what is it we can do for a greater solution, because I feel as though, you know, we've been in this space since April last year, and it's no fault of the team that we've maybe not found a solution to bring those numbers down. In addition to that, and I'll finish with this point, obviously, as an organisation, we're totally behind the forced mobilisation model, and I have no doubt that is having an adverse effect right across professional standards, with 20% of Helen's resources being drawn in to do other tasks at the weekend, which means the day-to-day work is probably still sitting there waiting for them when they come back. So there's a range of challenges here, and I think I conclude with, you know, the output of this has been that those complaints are probably suffering just a little bit. I think I'll pause there, and I'm sure Helen and James will want to get into a bit more detail.
Thank you, Alan. Helen.
Thank you, DCC, for those comments, and I guess lots of points there that have been raised by the committee, and very happy to kind of take that away. You know, I do think the BDO report has come at a good time for us, at a time when Centurion is being upgraded in the next 2 weeks, which is really positive for us. But that BDO report, whilst the report was there as well, some of the work that they did around our process maps in the background as well, around that as well, and some of the discussions that we've had, I think we're going to be able to draw out more value in terms of some of that as well, to add to some of the report recommendations. Some of the recommendations are quite kind of, I guess, challenging, around reliant on digital division, or AI, and all of that type of robotics, that's the word I was looking for, robotics and that type of thing. But we need to be in that space, and we need to be exploring that without any question of doubt. So my, I guess, reassurance to the committee is that we will bring back that wider plan that we want to take forward from the BDO side of things into the next committee. Our SOP, there was some immediate points around our SOP that we are looking at. It is under review at this point, and I know a discussion with Perk recently in respect of that. So our categorization, you know, we need to look at that, and we need to understand that a bit more in regards to that. So that's ongoing. I do think the work with the probationary sergeants, the visibility of complaints, it's not just PSD's problem or matter to solve. This is organisationally wide, because it's about service to the public. So I hope it will start some of those wider discussions taking place. So while at one point, obviously, they can take on these matters with the oversight and support of PSD, I hope it becomes then more visible for them as they lead their teams in trying to reduce those complaints. So those are obviously some of the things. And then our discussion with Perk around actually really helping us to understand what that proportionate expectations are around that, and then how we can balance some of that and think about some of our approaches to try and actually make sure we can better then respond to these matters that are coming in. So I guess those are some of the things immediately on my horizon within this really complex space, and obviously continue to try and share as much as that as we can with the committee, and provide that visibility around it. So I don't know if I've answered sorry, I'm just going to go back to the resource position as well with regards to that. The CI coming in for Nkaru, I really welcome that within the next 2 weeks, because that has been a vacancy that we've had for a little while, and therefore I think that will really help give that oversight and management within the team there. And the inspectors and James have been doing their absolute best with regards to that. Unfortunately, we are already down to 20 of our 26 resources as well that came in terms of staff investigators, and they do have different skills and experience. So some of them previous police experience, some of them not. So we've obviously had to work with them to find the area of the process that best fills their skill set, whilst also enabling that development and support. And we've invested in sort of training and making sure that they can maximize their contribution, and that we continue to do as well. I have to say the want is there from the team without any question or doubt, and I welcome the DCC's comments around what else can we do, and to push the kind of, I guess, you know, the ideas as much as we possibly can in this space.
Okay. No, I mean, thank you both, Alan and Helen, for this. So I don't think so the point of this isn't to negate, you know, or not to acknowledge, absolutely acknowledge the work that's happened. You know, Alan, I absolutely hear, you know, what you're doing, and this isn't about kind of discouraging or putting down the effort. And so you know, we are talking about this. We're talking about this in a lot more detail this year than we were ever before. I suppose where my kind of head is, though, is you know, these are substantial operational challenges, and I understand that complaints is just one small element of what PSD do, and PSD is an important function, but it is just one function of Police Scotland. So there is supposed, you know, in terms of order of priorities, in terms of, you know, the mission of Police Scotland, keeping people safe, there is a pecking order. So, and I think, you know, we're entirely realistic with that. At the same time, this is a process. There are statutory expectations. There are expectations on how quickly complaints are handled, how well they're handled. So it's, you know, it's not a trivial matter either. And I know nobody here suggests that it is. But I think, you know, considering the challenges, considering the size of the task, the challenges, the constraints, the available resource, I think what would ordinarily be required is a bit of a path to green, however long that path to green may take. And that path to green will need to have certain assumptions in it. So if the systems to Centurion are delivered, if this is delivered, when this is delivered, over time, there just needs to be a bit of a realistic kind of projection. You know, even if it's like, even if it, you know, if it's going to take you 10 years, it's going to take you 10 years. If it's going to take you 5 years, it's going to take you 5 years. But I think we almost need to have that escalated and potentially, you know, to board level. Because, you know, what I'm hearing is you have a really sizable problem. We understand it. We now understand it better than ever. The organization is struggling to get on top of this with, you know, I think understandable. I entirely understand that there's, you know, very valid reasons for this. But I think from an accountability perspective, we just need to understand what is that time horizon? And then is that time horizon, given the current resources, is that acceptable? And I think, you know, we just need to get that organizational position on it, because, you know, we've kind of, so far it's been more like, you've been telling us about all the really good work you're doing, but we're struggling to see the results, and we understand why, but we now need that, okay, how long is this going to be going on until? So that path to green, I think, will be quite critical alongside whatever plan you develop. And that's not, as I say, I repeat, it's not a criticism. We are pragmatic. I think we understand the constraints, but we've reached a stage where it's a bit, we need to take that, and somebody has to be able to say, this is how long it's going to take us, and it's either acceptable or it's not acceptable. So, and that's not coming from a position of, you know, as I say, being overly negative or critical. It's just being realistic, I think, at this stage. Paul, I hope you're in agreement or not. I'm sure you'll tell me.
For me, it's, I mean, I'm a scientist by background, and I'm thinking of my sort of rudimentary physics and the science of momentum. And if the momentum was going up the way, we're having to change that to push it down again. And I get that takes a surge of energy to do that, move it. At the moment, it feels like that Greek mythological figure that's pushing the rock up the hill. And does the guy need another few people helping to push until it gets to the top? I'm just looking for more momentum in this. I don't think we're going to get it absolutely perfect, but more momentum would be helpful and welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I see nodding. I entirely agree with that. You know, we just because it feels like doing more of the same. So time horizon, I think, is quite important. And what would it take? And then it's a question. It's a big organizational question. As I say, in light of other competing priorities, where is it? So, James, please.
Yeah, I support all the comments that have been made, and I think the session that I've set up with Alex Rich, the inspector, to do, you know, an input onto how we deal with our complex complaints, I think will assist to let the committee understand the steps involved and why it takes some time to shut down some of these complaints. And I think the boss has mentioned it a few times, but for me, the key to some of this lies in the proportionality space, because we have category B complaints, and I dip sample some of these and I sit with the operational teams who are working through them. And although they are meant to be dealt with as a proportionate inquiry with a proportionate outcome to a complainer, for example, I dip sampled 5 recently, and one of the letters extended to 30 pages because of the amount of allegations within there. And the most minimalistic letter was 5 pages. So even just to compose those final letters after the investigation's been done, you'll appreciate will take a member of staff a significant number of hours to do that and make it make sense for and accessible for the complainer, etc. And then it has to be checked by a supervisor before it goes out. So for me, it's all those wee bits, and if we improve all those wee bits, we will get a better picture. And I do commit to continue to try and come up with more innovative ideas to drive this forward. But just to give you a flavour of what the team are doing and the complexity around about those, even the proportionate inquiries.
Thank you for that, James. It's really helpful. And as I say, at no stage, I think we all understand this is a difficult job. If this was easy, you would have done it by now. So 100% understand that, and understand that, as Paul says, it is very difficult when there is a backlog. It is difficult to kind of stay on top of the newly coming in and the backlog, etc. So fully understand it is complex. And I think there's something around proportionality. I know, obviously, again, our PERC colleagues, I think, are still on the call. I know they have got, obviously, a big role to play in terms of kind of, that helping us to set the standard, helping Police Scotland to set the standard as to what's proportionate. So I know that you are fully engaged. And, as Helen quite rightly said, this isn't about cutting corners. This is about doing a good job on all of the complaints that is, proportionate to the complaint, proportionate to the allegations. It is a complex system. We fully understand that. Wishing you all the luck and all the, for all of your efforts, James. It's just from an assurance perspective, I know we keep rehearsing the same thing. We need to understand what extra is required to get that momentum going. How long is it going to take? Even, taking some assumptions. And if it's going to take as long as it's going to take, then it's a question of, is it sufficient, or what would it take extra to maybe accelerate it or not? So I understand it's complex. Helen.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to recognise, I think that, the real ask from the committee is as opposed to looking at what we're doing, is the look ahead. And we will take what we're doing and we will look ahead, and we will come back in February at the next meeting and really try and articulate what will be some assumptions, and we'll have to make assumptions. And as I'm aware as well, there obviously was an action on the action log just in relation to our staff investigators and the retention of those. Obviously, that is all hinged around budgetary decisions in relation to moving forward. So hopefully we will understand that picture a bit better in respect of that. So we've been able to evidence, what we've done within PSD around that, but there is that factor, obviously, once budgetary decisions have been made, and obviously the position of the chief has been articulated around some of that and the investment needed. So I guess I just wanted to acknowledge that and give you the reassurance that we have listened, or I'm listening to what you're saying here, and we will try and turn some of that dialogue around to, this is the position, this is the look ahead, and with those assumptions and what we need. So thank you.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you again, colleagues, and thank you for being so frank and candid, on this. I know it's a wicked issue. We know it's not easy. So I appreciate that commitment. Okay. I see no further hands on this. I think we've exhausted this. So I would, before we break, we've got just 2 more items. We've got the PECS update and the work plan. So maybe I suggest if we take those and then we have a short break before we go into the private session, if that's okay. So who is taking us through the PECS Act?
That's
yourself, Helen?
Myself, Chair, yes. But this will be brief, because it is just a kind of an update to the committee in respect of the work. So to give the reassurance, and obviously we've spoken at committee about the Code of Ethics for Policing, the discussions have continued. We did take a pause, rightfully so, I believe, on some of the feedback that we received to engage the Human Rights Advisor in relation to that, and who has given us some really helpful suggestions in relation to the development of the code. And we did a pause and double check that everything has been considered as it needs to, as be outlined within the PECS Act. So we are at the point that a final draft is going through internal sign off just at the moment, and at that point we will then obviously clearly share with the committee that I hope will be at some point early next week, before it then progresses to the next stage of the PECS requirements to be laid before Parliament, and we will then start the training in respect of that. So that continues to move forward with regards to that. The other part of the paper does touch a little bit on the vetting and conduct regs, which is obviously coming in relation to that, and the consultation that's ongoing as well. And I know SPA are involved in that as well. So I don't think I have anything more on the paper, other than to give the reassurance that work has continued. We have taken a pause on the back of some of the feedback, taken some wider advice, and we are now continuing forward, and we hope that the Code of Ethics for Policing will soon be at the final stage.
Okay. Thank you very much for the report and for the update. I think for me, the one thing on this, which I've got noted down from last time that we discussed it as well, is that I think we would quite like to see the final draft of the code together with the summary of the consultation responses. So I think, where we are going, what we would like to see is that evidence of meaningful engagement, Helen, I think, which you've just touched on. So ahead of it being late in Parliament would be quite good to have that. Yeah, and I see you nodding.
Share that with you, and hopefully it will be in the next couple of weeks. No problem.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you for that update. That's helpful. Colleagues, are there any questions on this or any comments, observations? I see none. Fantastic. Okay, that's great. Which just leaves the work plan, which I think is for noting. So I wasn't going to be talking much about this. I think that's good. Okay, right. Well, I think this concludes our public session. I think we will, what I suggested is that we take a relatively short break, maybe until 1:10. I know it doesn't give us much of a lunch, but then hopefully we'll be finished by 2.